Appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to attend. And Glen, I'll probably go off of you. If you can just kind of give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen, the PowerPoint deck, just so we see it. Perfect. That sounds great. So my name's Josh Felix. I'm with MLevel. MLevel is a digital learning platform based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And the purpose of this webinar was really to discuss the culture of learning and why learning is important within the corporate landscape. So to join me, I had a series of different panelists that have joined from around the region industry. And to go ahead and start off, Michele Wideman, she's the Chief Customer Officer of Onna. So excited to have Michele with us. Glen Hasling, he's with Equifax, Organizational Change Management and Learning Leader. He spent time at Home Depot, Citi, as well as Accenture. Kaylene Eckels, Chief Operating Officer at Etech, also spent a lot of time at Dun & Bradstreet. Finn Toner with Google, he's with the Customer Culture and Change. He spent time at Accenture as well as MindGym. And then also Michele Snead. Michele's with Insight as the Director of Performance Consulting and just very well known throughout the learning industry in regards to what's taking place in the world today. So we're going to ask ourselves this initial question, the why question. Why have a webinar focused on the culture of learning? Learning cultures impact all areas of your business, from productivity, tension. In fact, when I was going through and really doing some research to get this started, there's an old IBM study that said focusing on the value of employee training showed that 84% of employees within the best performing organizations are receiving the training they need compared to 16 in the worst performing companies. So it matters to employees, it helps your business grow, making it one of the most important practices for your organization. And we can look at two individuals, Josh Burson, who within the L&D community, very well respected. The single biggest driver of business impact is the strength of an organization's learning culture. And also, Finn, this might resonate with you. When employees are satisfied and engaged, the result is deeper customer connections and an elevated customer experience. And that's from Corey, and Corey's a leader at Google. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive in and start really getting into what the whole purpose of this webinar is all about. And it's the purpose of culture. So to get us started, I'm going to pose a question. Actually, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. If you're attending, we're just going to ask that you turn your video off. There's a video button at the top. And that initial question is really an opening statement from our panelists that are here. And Kate, we're going to start with you. So sorry to put you on the spot. What is a learning culture in an organization?
You said Kaylene, right?
Kaylene, yes.
Yes. Okay. I feel like I won the lottery. First of all, thank you for having us here today. I'm excited. I was telling everyone I have my pen handy and I'm ready to learn. And hopefully I can add some value as well. And but I think a learning culture in an organization boils down to a shared set of values that support ongoing growth and development. And I believe to have a learning culture, there's 5 critical points that must be cared for by us, and I'll cover them real quickly. So number 1 is we have to be intentional. And what I mean by being intentional is we have to build it into our strategic business plans. Number 2 is, I believe, clarity is critical. It's important to be clear about expectations, and everyone knows that there's an expectation to grow and develop and learn. Number 3 is about resources. And when you think about resources, I think about the tools and systems and people that we have in place to support growth and development. Number 4 is about measurement. And when I say measurement, I'm just saying a thoughtful way to measure our progress. And I think about our Vice President of Partner Strategy, Patrick Reynolds. He was telling me about his mom. And she lives in Kaylene, Texas, and she was going on a trip with her friends to New Orleans. So imagine you're all excited, you're in the car, you're going on this big weekend trip, and they're talking and having a good time. And they look up and all of a sudden they see a sign. It says, "Welcome to Mexico." And when I say welcome to Mexico, I mean like the country of Mexico. They literally were in line. If you've gone, you know, you can't turn around. Like they literally had to go into Mexico, turn around and come back into the United States. And it's just a great illustration of if you don't change direction, you may end up where you're going, but not where you intend it to be. And then number 5 is about connecting value. And that's really the WIFM, what's in it for me? How will creating this culture of learning and development add value to your team and to your company and to your customers?
No, Kaylene, we appreciate that. Finn, we're going to throw it over to you. Finn is based in London, so we appreciate him taking time, and Finn's with the Google team. Finn?
Thanks, Josh. And it's evening here, so our neighbor has just set off a bunch of fireworks. So if you hear anything in the background, I promise it's something. There's somebody out there celebrating something, which is good news at the moment. Kaylene, I guess I would really echo the point you made about the expectation to learn. I think for me, I would say one of the really important characteristics of a culture of learning is that very public recognition of the importance of learning. From leadership, management within the teams, learning is very explicitly recognized as being something that is very important, and that there is that public reinforcement of that. I think the second thing, moving from a functional maturity towards it being more endemic in a culture, is that learning should be something that's organic. I think the kind of the fancy term for it is the democratization of learning. What I think I really mean here is learning isn't seen as something that only trainers or only L&D is allowed to do, and that really any expert on a subject is allowed or is enabled and empowered to contribute to that. And then I think the third point I'll make is that formal learning is obviously really important, but there's also a recognition that learning happens in real life. And so when something goes wrong, a learning culture should capture and scale things which have gone wrong and seek to find ways to improve those, and also seek to kind of build and scale the things that have gone well. That's what I mean by learning also happens in real life and takes them back so that they can be reused for a bigger audience.
No, that was great, Finn. I loved your point there, especially when you're talking about, anybody can be a learning expert, right? It doesn't just have to be the trainer necessarily. So let's go to Michele Wideman. Michele with Onna. Michele?
Hey, I think I'm going to elaborate a little bit about what Finn said, because I think it plays really well into why diversity is also so important. Because when I think diversity, I really think diversity of experience. Being in more of a customer success role when we're constantly dealing with problems, having a really diverse team and having out of the box thinking about how we would resolve issues is so important. So Finn, I really like your point about what happens in real life, because I think people's experiences have such a big impact of problem resolution and innovative ideas. And I think for me, it's really keeping it simple. I mean, it is creating a culture that is constantly fostering and encouraging, learning, and that happens at all levels. I mean, at the higher end level, it's companies offering stipends to encourage career growth. At the managerial level, it's constantly leveraging, our network, since most leaders have been in this space for a really long time, and introducing people to other folks in our network that might be able to mentor and help people progress in their careers and just provide new out-of-the-box thinking. And I totally agree with both what Kaylene and Finn said. It's about the people you hire too, and having people that are full of grit and want to learn more and are self-learners and don't need a lot of, kicking in the butt to go do and want to do more and always be better.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love how we're just kind of building on everybody's thoughts here. Glen, your thoughts on the opening statement?
Sure. So I have a similar definition in terms of a learning culture. It kind of demonstrates the value that a company puts and invests, not only within the company, but its employees as well. It's got to be both, right? So learning isn't just about bottom line metrics. It's also about the employees, since the employees make up the company and are often the most important part of that company. I would say that one of the things that I've been trying to do is expand the definition of learning, right? Even over the past decade or two, people tend to take learning culture associated with a training event, right? So you don't want to paint a learning culture into the corner with a training event, because then people think, hey, I only learn when I'm in training. And that's not the case, right? You have to really embrace and make a more inclusive definition to include shadowing or mentorship, as well as formal and informal learning. So I think that kind of helps inform the culture. And the next thing, I think you have to really look at your cultural piece and strive to be the Amazon of learning, right? Learning has to be easy. And from easy, I mean, there's two real key components. It's accessibility. Learning has to be accessible, and it's relevancy. So accessibility could be anything from, is the content, is the learning, is it indexed, is it curated, is it accessible from your LMS? Is it searchable, right? Does it push content that's relevant to you, right? And the relevancy is also important. And what that allows you to do is take the learning and meet your learners, your employees, where they want to be met, right? It could be in the field, could be in the office, it could be just-in-time learning. And so that accessibility and relevancy, as well as the expanded definition of what includes learning modalities are included, that's really what the culture is about, I think.
No, I love it. I love the point that you just met. It just has to be easy. Like, it has to be easy to get to. There can't be any barriers there. I have to be able to access it at point of need when I need it. I want to do training when I want to do training. I don't necessarily want to be told I need to be in a classroom at 9 a.m., especially in the world today. I mean, imagine, you know, we have to go get kids off the bus. My little guy, you know, I think it's 15 minutes and my wife's going to go grab him off the bus, right? You know, I couldn't be in a training course right there, you know, so we have to be, you know, accessible. It has to be easy. Michele Snead, with Insight. Michele, you and I spend a lot of time discussing this, especially when we talk about potential partners, you know, at MLevel. And you've spoke about culture for 20 plus years at Insight. Give us your thoughts in regards to, you know, what is a learning culture within an organization?
Sure. I mean, I think I certainly echo all the sentiments of everybody else. But for me, learning culture is really about inspiring teammates to want to learn. There's so much education that we're forced to take, right? How to use tools, how to go through processes. And I think 2020 has really highlighted that you have to have a passion for wanting to kind of self-direct and learn new and different things. And so learning culture for me is about making sure that, you know, you're supported in doing different types of learning activities, that an organization is giving you those opportunities. I mean, Glen, you mentioned, you know, curated content. Organizations have to provide content, but you can provide different outlets for learning. Training is only one step in the process to learn. It's about applying those skills. And when I was preparing for the webinar, I just thought about all the different types of learning I've done in 2020, and it's amazing, right? So I've had standard training. We also have, you know, focus groups where we're learning different things through different groups, like how to meditate so you can focus. So just as much as it's important to do your job and make sure you have the leadership training, it's also about how to do things that extend that whole learning process. And I think that when you're afforded the opportunity to learn beyond just the classroom or the virtual classroom as it is today, I think you're more loyal, you're more satisfied, and you're applying techniques that are allowing you to do your job much better. So for me, learning culture is always about, you know, self-directed and teammates who are inspired to learn and do it on their own.
No, I appreciate that, Michele. So before we move on, we're going to throw up a quick poll. So we're using some new functionality that our friends at Microsoft just launched recently. So fingers crossed that everything works, but let's go ahead and launch this poll. You should see it within your chat function. It is live. We'll go ahead and put that in there. Does your company have a culture of learning? It's very simple. Yes or no. We'll just take some time to collect the data. Okay, it's trending in the right direction, which is good. And we'll close it out here in about 5 seconds. Okay, and we'll close down that poll. So with that, so it's great, you know, yes, 87%, you know, say that their company does have a culture of learning, you know, which is great news in regards to what we're looking to make happen within this industry. So as we continue down, I want to pose another question to our panel, and we can really have a discussion around this. And Kaylene, I'm going to start with you on this one. So what are the potential challenges with developing a culture of learning, and how do you strategically overcome them? And you're on
I need
mute.
to watch my mute button. Yes. I think That's a great question. Potential challenges. I think it's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind, right? Like the everyday urgent. And that's also probably what keeps us in that whirlwind if we're not really focused on leveraging resources to create this culture of training and development. I'm also guilty of over-engineering things, and I heard Michele about keeping it simple. And if my team is on this call right now, I hope they're all on mute because they're really laughing right now. They're like, "Yes, Michele, keep it simple." They're cheering you on. And what I've learned is that keeping it simple really is the best approach, and that's why leveraging like micro learning and really focusing on building blocks over time can be effective. And then another challenge I think is lack of integration and really getting all the teams working together. And I agree with the other panelists that you have to be inclusive and really involve everyone. We have an amazing quality team called Etech Insights. It's a team of data scientists, and they leverage AI to identify key behaviors that can improve performance results. And we had our quality team and our training team and our operations team. They were all kind of running separately. And what we found is we just really had to focus on the integration of all those teams and take those quality insights, those behaviors, and feed them into our training team so we can improve our initial training, but then also our ongoing training on the floor, and really leverage the power of micro learning to get that quick information into the hands of our team members that were on the floor, taking the calls in the moment, and then measure the results, pre their training and then post their training. And this focus on positive behaviors, it helped change the mindset of our team, because we weren't trying to fix what was wrong. We were trying to emulate what was right. And applying that learning really helped us improve the overall performance results. And then our software development team came in, and they actually took the MLevel courses that we had, and they were able to put them into our quality tool, QEval Pro. So anytime it was observed the behavior wasn't there, we could assign that training in the moment and reach that person, like Glen was talking about, and how they could access it quickly and it could be of benefit to them. And we saw a great improvement in results from that integration. So I would say integration is really part of our secret sauce, and incorporating MLevel is really helped to support learning and development.
No, that's great. Michele Wideman, what about you in regards to, develop, the challenges that you've been faced with? You've been at some pretty big companies, and you've been faced with this challenge, and obviously success has been seen by awards that have been won. What are those challenges, and how do you strategically overcome them?
I think a lot of people are afraid of the cost of a learning culture will create, and I don't necessarily think that is the case at all. And I really think people, like Kaylene was saying, think it's going to take your focus off of other areas of priority, but I really think it accelerates things. I mean, one of my best learning opportunities is creating a strong peer group of people that I can go network with and bounce ideas off of, because they can quickly redirect me and say, oh no, we tried that. Don't go down that path. That's going to cost you a lot of, time, money, hours, headaches, whatever. So I really think, that a lot of the comments that were made about don't force learning and make it like an educational course, I'm going to emphasize again, just the networking component, I think is so important. It doesn't cost a thing, and it can really be a great sounding board to help ensure you're hitting project goals and deadlines at an accelerated pace.
Yeah, that's great. Glen, going to you, I want to say keeping it here in Atlanta because we're the only ones in Atlanta. But, you've been, some big companies as well, right? And you're with a large company right now. And, a big focus of yours is that, change management side. How do you focus on those challenges, and how do you strategically overcome them?
Well, it varies. I would say there's two key things. Looking over my career, I would say there's two key things. And I think Michele Wideman touched on it. Number one is cost. A lot of businesses are looking at, they're looking at their spreadsheets, and they look at learning and the investment in learning as a cost. They don't look at it as an investment. So when it's viewed as an expense and not an investment, it's it gets scrutinized a lot. And the other thing is when you look at learning development in and of itself may not be that expensive, but then you look at the labor cost when you're with a large company, and the labor cost is really what should get people worried about. It's not the actual learning development cost. But bottom line, if I go and say I need $50,000 for something, the finance team's going to look at me kind of cross-eyed. The next part I've found is that there's often conflicting priorities. And I've seen this more in operations organizations where you have like a productivity metric, like a sales per hour metric. And so what happens is if a store isn't busy, for instance, and it's a good time for an employee to take some learning, some e-learning or whatever, they're off the floor, their sales metrics per hour drop. And so they get reprimanded. But they actually need the training because there's new product and they need the product knowledge, but they can't do it because of this vicious cycle. So I think you really need to be very mindful of productivity metrics. And that's not so much that the learning isn't good. The learning could be outstanding. But what it does is it impacts the execution of that learning. And in a large company, that's a big deal, right? So if my execution rates are 20 or 30%, it's very difficult for me to get the measures. If I can't get the measures, it's hard to justify. However, if my execution rate is at 90%, I can take the measures with a very high level of confidence that the learning did work or not. So I think those two key things, it's looking at it from a cost standpoint and then looking at the productivity metrics to make sure there's no conflicts. Resolving it, I think this is something that just comes with time. What I have found is that you as a learning leader need to speak the language of the business. You need to speak their language, not have them learn your language. You need to understand what levers, what metrics they're accountable to, and speak that language. You can't come in and say, hey, I trained X number of employees, or we trained this many people, this number of hours per year. You have to say, here's what I contributed through the learning event, uptick in sales, percent of sales increase, or reduction in cost, or cycle time, or improvement in customer satisfaction. Those are the things that business people are worried about. And so if you can speak their language, they're going to support you and they're going to get you the budget, and they're going to remove barriers like a productivity metric that may kind of be a stumbling block for a lot of organizations. So that's kind of my experience.
No, I love it. I love it. I see Michele Snead shaking her head. Michele, I was working with one of your team members I think it was last week, and I was talking to Drew, and Drew and I were talking about that same thing, right? Is it important that we're talking about learning, or is it important that we're actually talking about what the end result of the learning will get us? What are your thoughts in regards to the challenges that you've seen? You kind of come at it from a different side. You come from the consulting side more so you see a wide variety of different logos, as you go through your daily challenges.
So I think it's a couple of things. I mean, I think we've kind of talked about it. Training can be an event. Learning and building a culture of learning is a journey. And so to take that journey, there's a lot of steps. And so you have to have leadership, alignment, and commitment. If somebody at the highest levels isn't willing to engage to help drive the culture, and sometimes it's in different spaces than you think. It may not be the person that's in charge of learning or HR. To Glen's point, it's somebody that's responsible for outcomes. And training, I think I've learned through the years, you can't talk about you need training. You have to talk about value and business outcomes as a result of enabling people. And so it's not just about an event. It really is about figuring out how you're going to drive value to the business. And I think too, sometimes people think this is going to happen overnight. We're going to put out a bunch of classes and we're going to change the culture. I see Glen laughing. It doesn't happen overnight. And so instead of, kind of building this broad library of things that you want to do, pick an area, start small, pilot, get feedback. Feedback loop is really important. You can offer a ton of training, but if nobody gives you feedback that it's valuable and you can't share metrics, then it truly is that. It's a library of content. And so I think, it really is about, just getting people on board, figuring out how to kind of monetize, what that looks like, making sure people have the time. There's a lot of negotiations with like HR and different groups to make sure that whatever culture you're trying to build you can make sure that you can give people time to do those types of activities. So I think it really is a journey. It needs to be a project, an initiative, a program. It needs to have change management. It really needs to be driven holistically. It's really not just, building a library of content.
No, that's great. Okay, Finn, you're going to be up next with the next question. But before we go there, I want to go ahead and launch our next poll because I think it plays really well in regards to what everyone was just speaking about. So
may I just, I'll just make one
go
brief
right ahead,
point.
Finn,
But both Michele and Glen touched on the fact that cultivating a learning culture is a journey. I think it's a really important point to reiterate. And I read a really lovely phrase which has kind of stuck with me, which I think kind of encapsulates it. It's that changing a culture is a bit like putting a seed on a linoleum floor and expecting it to grow. It's obviously not going to grow. You have to think about the environment in which you're planting that seed. And I think it touches on some of the points that Glen's point about metrics, a really, really good one. Michele's point about negotiating with the broader ecosystem beyond it just being a kind of content play. Just a kind of a big +1 to both of those points.
No, I appreciate you jumping in there. That's very important. I'm getting some fabulous quotes right now. So just so you know, I feel like I'm going to be able to write a great blog from some of these quotes that we're getting. So I appreciate it. So we're going to launch this next poll here. So as it comes out, our organization measures the impact of employee learning on achieving business goals. 4 choices. Go ahead and put in your thoughts, and we'll watch the information coming in. Okay, we'll give it about 5 more seconds as we capture the votes. And we'll go ahead and close it out. Okay, so some great insight in regards to what just took place with that poll. I think it plays well. It looks like the majority had to a moderate extent. And Finn, with that, I'm going to come to you. And, what is the benefit of creating a learning culture? We just spoke about what we're looking for and the challenges, right? But let's talk about the true benefits. You've been, at a lot of different organizations, some very big, consulting firms to one of the most well-respected organizations now that you're with in regards to when it comes to culture as a whole. What is the true benefit of creating a learning culture?
Sure. So, Josh, my role at the moment, I work with some of our biggest cloud customers, really helping them to adopt cloud and improve their software development practices and start to develop a culture which facilitates kind of top-class engineering. Through the research that we've done, we find that a learning culture is a really good positive predictor of software delivery performance. I know I probably come with this with the tech bias, and some of the audience may have that, some may not. But in terms of that relationship between a team having a culture or having an environment which values learning and values self-development, the correlation is really clear with faster time to deployment, reduced time to making changes, faster time to recover when something goes wrong. Now, for an engineering team, these are incredibly quantifiable metrics. The cost of a service being down is very, very real. So I think it kind of getting to that level of granularity does, I think, help facilitate the conversation that we started to have in the previous question about how you speak the language of the business, or how do you turn some of those softer benefits into kind of harder, more quantifiable things. I think the other big benefit is that when something goes wrong, there will be a hunger within that team and within that broader organization to understand what went wrong, to identify the root cause, and to establish what can be done in the future to improve that. And that kind of getting to that culture of continual self-improvement, I think is a really powerful benefit. So those are the 2 that I would say is landing on the cost, and being able to kind of drive towards that self-improvement.
No, I love it. Michele Wideman, what about you from your perspective, especially when you look at more the customer, right? What do you find as the benefit truly of the learning culture?
Yeah, I think Finn and I could go geek out since I've been in the tech space for over 20 years as well. And it's funny because, I think a lot of people just do this innately because we realize the value in it. So yesterday I was trying to pull some stats that I could actually, announce on this call that would back those data points up. And what I found was exactly to what Finn was saying. It says companies have a 26% better track record of producing quality products and are delivering stellar services when they have a learning culture, which I think is huge. And then the other thing was they are 32% more likely to be the first to market with an innovative solution. So for me, especially when serving the customers, it's all about delivering a stellar customer experience, putting the customer at the forefront of everything you do, and trying to stay, innovative so you're retaining all of your customers. Oh, I think you're on mute, Josh.
See, it's Kaylene, it's rubbing off. Sorry. The best part is that I'm calling on you next. So, Kaylene, from your seat, obviously, you really have two hats, serving as the chief operating officer, at Etech. You both have your clients that you all service, as well as you have the team that services those clients. So when you think about learning, what is the bit of creating a learning culture in those two aspects?
What is is it the same question? The benefit?
It is, yeah. But,
yeah.
I want to look at it from your lens. So.
Yeah, I would agree with what Finn was saying when he talked about faster time to deployment. And I wrote some notes because it was so good. And hunger to solve problems. And Michele said 32% more likely innovative solution. That's the first thing I think of is a learning culture is going to be innovative. That's one of the best benefits is which leads to increased growth opportunities, right, for your team and for your business. Our Senior Vice President of Operational Excellence, his name's David Carrizales, and he reminds us constantly that we have to reinvent continuously. And that's from a great book called The Secret. We can pop it in the, David, if you're on, can you pop it in the chat window? But we teach on that book here at Etech. And it's the SERVE model. It's a great book by Ken Blanchard and Mark Miller. And the R in the SERVE model is reinvent continuously. And the E happens to be engage and develop others, the first E. And so it fits nicely with what we're talking about. But that reinvention, that innovation, that hunger, as Finn said, it moves your business forward. And then I think another benefit is improved retention, because if you have a learning culture and people are constantly learning and growing, they're green, they're going to be more successful. They're going to have higher job satisfaction, and you're just going to perform better and retain the right people. And then a deeper leadership bench has also been a benefit for us of creating a learning culture, an environment where people feel like they have opportunity to grow, and also that they have the tools and resources that they need to grow.
Yeah, that's great, Kaylene. I can't wait. We're doing a debrief after this, a more informal debrief on Clubhouse. So if you've been on Clubhouse or you're a member of Clubhouse, come join us after this, because myself and Matt Gill from Insight are really going to start breaking these things down. So I can't even wait to see the notes that Matt has. It's going to go on and on. So make sure you join us on that. Also take a quick stretch, as I like to say, because we're almost at the halfway point. Throw in the chat where you're joining us from. We'd love to see, because I know for the panelists, we're coming from around the globe, which is exciting. But we want to see where our attendees are coming from as well. So go ahead and put that in the chat. Look forward to seeing that. Michele, Snead, coming your way next. In regards to a culture, why isn't every culture a learning culture? In regards to your eyes, because you've seen all different kinds of companies and you're there trying to implement this goal of creating a culture of learning, why in some ways is a culture just not a learning culture?
Well, I think sometimes there's a lot of, competition for other things. I think it depends on, how you operate your business. Not every culture, I think, right out of the gate lends itself to thinking that they're a culture of learning. And so I think it's about time commitment. It's about, what you're able to allow, your customers or your consultants or your employees do as it relates to learning. The other thing is that I don't know that people truly understand how to build a learning culture. They don't have internal talent to help, start driving that content. They don't have outlets for beginning some of that delivery. So I think that, I think most organizations strive to be a learning culture, but they don't necessarily have the tools, the resources at their disposal to kind of accelerate that learning culture and drive benefit.
No, appreciate that insight. Glenn, how about you? Obviously, your journey's, it's interesting. You went from, Home Depot, to Equifax, two different places, right? Has there ever been a point that you're like, wow, we're just not seeing that learning culture, and, how do we get that developed?
Well, maybe it's because I tend to be a little bit more optimistic. I think every organization has a learning culture. So let me back up and kind of explain what I mean. So humans are wired inherently to learn, right? Whether it's out of want or need. You're driving to work, there's an accident, you have to reroute and find a new route to work. That's out of need. You're tired of cooking your dinner out of a box, so out of want, you want to learn a new recipe. So humans are wired that way. The question is, to what degree, right? And, journey or continuum is your company on that learning culture, right? And I think everyone's kind of a lifetime learner. That's kind of how I look at it. But how has your company tapped into that inherent desire to learn and grow? I've never had an employee come up and say, no, I'm fine where I am, Glenn, I don't want to grow. Whether it's horizontally in the job or vertically, every single person I know wants to learn and grow. So what has your company done to tap into it, right? So from a spectrum standpoint, I've kind of seen it all. I've seen the, I don't want to say low, that makes it sound negative. You've got one end of the spectrum, a continuum, where learning isn't formalized, knowledge is tribal, and it's more of a pull environment, right? Or a push environment where a manager taps an employee on his shoulder and says, hey, it's your time to go to this 8-hour class. That's a push, right? And then there's the other end, which is more favorable to the businesses that we're discussing, which is that pull environment, formalized learning, curated content, ongoing support. That's a more favorable, culture, I think. But both of them, there's learning, right? Both of them, there's learning. The tribal knowledge, right? The tapping on the shoulder and sending you to a training class, and as well as, having a mentorship or some of these other modalities that we discussed today. So just out of optimism, I say everyone has a learning culture. You're just in a different place, to Michelle's point, on that journey, on that continuum. And I've been kind of on all of them. It just depends on the nature of the project or of the work I'm doing. So no company's starting from scratch. That's probably the easiest way to put it, but you got to figure out where you are. I forgot who said it earlier, but when you're mapping out that journey, you have to know where you are so you can figure out where you're going. And that's what everyone has to do. So.
Finn, going to come over to you next. In regards to what you see, obviously you spend a lot of time, as we would say, in dealing with international companies, globally. What do you see? Do you see a big difference in what you see in the UK, versus the countries that surround you and you work with, or is everything pretty much the same?
Josh, it's a really good question. I'll also just build really quickly on something Glenn just made the point about humans being lifelong learners. I think in various states of lockdown around the world, people have demonstrated the desire and hunger to continue to learn, whether it's how to make sourdough bread, or how to knit, or how to practice mindfulness. So again, another kind of big +1 to that. Josh, I think in terms of the and maybe it's also touching on the last year that we have had, and the pivot that so many organizations have gone through to working virtually. I think that has driven a shift, maybe in the UK, maybe more broadly in Europe, to help move the perception away from learning equals a training course, more towards this continuous spectrum whereby a really valuable piece of the Learning Practitioners Toolkit is a training course, but it's one tool within that broader toolkit, be it a more push or be it in a more pull culture. It's just one thing. So I think that's one thing that has started to shift. I guess the second maybe point I'd make is maybe less of an international point, more of an industry specific point. I think regulation can make organizations feel that they can't have some of the cultural elements that we've talked about, like a decentralized network of subject matter experts who kind of drive the learning. For a big bank, that might be quite a scary sounding thing, whereby the organizational tendency is maybe to control things. Again, I think that perception is maybe shifting. Again, another plus one to Glen's point, or the intention that every organization has a learning culture. It's just about finding the right way for it to grow. And Josh, you're on mute.
I know, I'm sorry. I keep hitting the button and I hit the wrong one. Michele Wideman, wanted to get your thoughts in regards to it.
I think for me, this is why diversity is so important to me when I'm building customer success teams, because how you treat your customers is so different depending upon where in the world they are. And I was telling this story the other day. One of my top success people was in the Netherlands. And at the Netherlands, cake, they love cake. They took cake to every big production launch or 1-year anniversary or celebration. And I think as smaller companies are moving into larger global markets, it's really important to understand what are the cultural norms in those markets, because it helps us have a better customer experience for those folks.
That's great. Yeah, no, great insight. Anybody else want to jump in on that before we move on to the next question? Kaylene or Michele, Snead? All good? Okay. Perfect. Jim Ayub wants cake. Jim, I know you're not in the Netherlands. I'm positive. You might still have snow at your house in Texas, but you're not in the Netherlands. So the next question we're going to go into, and Kaylene, I'm going to come to you with this one. How can L&D create an environment that truly fosters innovation and learning?
Okay, this is another great question. First, let me say, I believe, as our other panelists were saying, that all people, they want to be successful, and that most people understand that innovation and learning are keys to help them be successful. That's why it's so important, I think, as leaders, that we help create these organic opportunities for our team to grow and develop. But how do we do this, right? That's the trick that we're all working to refine, and especially as our business climates change. And I just want to recap on some of the points that we discussed earlier. I think it's critical to be intentional. So like at Etech, for example, we have, all companies have a value system, right? And ours are known as our 12 character commitments, and teachability and courage are 2 of those commitments. Teachability is obvious, and then courage is something we focus on, because when you're trying something, you might fail. So it's important that it's acceptable for our team to know that it's okay. It's just part of the learning process. You have to put yourself out there. And we also believe, to achieve our vision and mission, that we need people who are intentional with development, and they put action behind that development. Think about John Maxwell's law of the lid, if any of you have heard of that. But basically what that is it's difficult to grow your team beyond your own skill set. So we just encourage everyone to be green and continue to grow. And then number 2 was clarity. We talked about being clear, crystal clear, that there's an expectation for all of us to grow. And it doesn't matter what your position is in our company. It doesn't matter even what your performance level is. There's always an opportunity to grow and develop. Our president and CEO, Matt Rocco, he talks about the journey, and Michele said that early on, that it's a journey, and we couldn't agree more with that. Number 3 was resources, and resources, again, this is like people or systems, and in one case, like leadership development was so important to us that we created a role, Dean of Leadership Development. This position is held by a really talented person, Melissa Wood, who's a contact center veteran and a life coach. And she and her talented team, they're teaching skills that people can use both in and outside of the workplace, because we know that it's personal. Someone talked about meditation earlier. I mean, there's just so many things that we can do to help our people grow and develop. And then, resources in terms of, your new hire training and your ongoing training and development, your mentorship programs, and then there's also external resources that you can provide, things like tuition reimbursement and help with certifications. Someone touched on that earlier as well. And then we talked about measurement, right? You don't want to end up in Mexico when you're trying to go to New Orleans. And it's really important to measure, as you go, because you just have to know whether you need to change course or not. So what are your performance KPIs before you do training or a skill transfer? And then what does it look like after you did the skill transfer, the training, or the real-time monitoring, or whatever it is that you're doing? And I have Jim Ayub's voice in my head. Josh, you mentioned him a second ago. And for those of you who know him, it's really loud and distracting. But he reminds me that quality is a behavior, and that behaviors can be measured. So it just goes back to, how important it is for us to constantly be measuring the impact of what it is that we're doing. And then last, it was just about connecting value. And how will learning and development bring value? I think the more people understand what we're trying to accomplish and how, what we're trying to teach or learn, or the coaching that we're providing, how it will bring value to them, the more widely it'll just be embraced. And we have 3 simple questions that we ask our team. I'd love to share them with you right now real quickly to help build that value and connect that value. So number 1, when we're trying to transfer knowledge, we ask the team, why is this important to you personally? That's that WIFM. How will it benefit you? Number 2, we ask the team, why is it important to our clients? Because we want them to connect what it is that we're working on to how it will benefit our customers. And then number 3, we ask them, why is it important to our organization? And how will it benefit our company? And because everyone wants, to work for a successful team, right? So as they self-discover and answer these questions, we find that it just creates that buy-in and just helps in the learning process.
No, that's great, Kaylene. I appreciate it. And, in the chat, we can start using that really as an AMA. Ask us anything. I guess I should say AUA now. It's not asking me. So ask us anything. So go ahead and put any questions that you have in the chat. That'll serve as our AMA here. And if we're not able to get to your question, we'll make sure that one of the panelists does follow up with you following the webinar. So feel free to put those in. But right now, just to let's do a little recap. We'll go around the table because we want to respect time. We have 9 minutes left. And Michele, Snead, we'll start with you. Just, a couple thoughts, a couple of closing thoughts in regards to, creating a culture of learning and the importance of it.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, I think, as I mentioned, it is a journey and it's something that needs to be planned for. And from a learning and development, perspective, it is about, taking into consideration the types of content, the way it's delivered. Things have changed in a year dramatically on the learning front. There's different types of tools out there. I mean, if you looked at 2020, immersive technology and AR and VR and social were at the bottom of the list. They are now at the top. And a lot of it has to do with, the product of what we're doing. And so I think it's about, planning for the journey, but it's also thinking outside of the box, tasking your organization to not just think about a training class that's delivered in person or something that's delivered virtual or content at you, but explore all those options. Social, look at new tools, think about, immersive technology, because today is different than it was, 12 months ago, and I think it's going to continue to change.
I had the button. There we go. Finn, how about you? little closing thought.
Thanks, Josh. I mean, I guess throughout the conversation, we've touched on how learning is very intertwined with innovation and creating an environment where people are able to learn, and that feeds into the freedom or an environment which is innovative. And I think for me, my biggest go-to would be to find the experts, particularly when if there's a new technology coming over the horizon. There will be people within your organization who are tinkering around, they're experimenting side of desk with something to see how it works, to find out more. It's a passion project for them. Find those people and kind of create there's a curriculum framework which is kind of 101. It's basic technology. It's applicable to everybody. There's 201, which is kind of functional tooling, which is maybe role specific. It's a bit more advanced. 301 is that stuff which is brand new. It's just coming over the horizon. Over time, the 301 becomes the 201. But when you're tapped into those experts who are kind of tinkering around the edges, that's where you identify the 301 content, and that's where I think the magic mix of learning and innovation can start to happen. I'll stop waving my hands around now, Josh.
Got it. Yeah. Michele Wideman, your thoughts? Closing thoughts?
I think my closing thoughts would be, build a business case if you're looking for the learning stipend, money that you can give to everybody, and how that'll help either retain, existing employees, or accelerate deal closure and close more revenue, or create more innovative products. But you can also do a lot of things that aren't very costly and expensive. And I think it goes back to, what Fen was saying. People need to have fun and be creative. So set up hackathons within your company that allow people to geek out and do something different. Set up guilds within your company on certain topics that people might be interested in discussing more. There's a ton of meetups that are out there that are free based on industry. Is it sales? Is it success? Is it support? Encourage your employees to go to those events as well, because I think anytime you can build your network and cheat off of somebody else's homework of where they've done it well, then incorporate what they've done well, it's a win for everybody.
No, I appreciate that. And there are so many different things out there. And Michele, I'll just kind of piggyback off what you were saying. Come join us on Clubhouse after. We're going to debrief. Clubhouse is another great place that it's amazing with the individuals you get to interact with in these Clubhouse sessions. I won't mention there's definitely been some interesting discussions that have taken place that end up making the news. Kaylene, going to come to you on closing thoughts.
I need to keep my mute button access better management there. But first of all, I'm just so excited about this because I learned a lot today. I have like 3 pages of notes from everyone and what they shared with us. And I would just say that for everyone on this call who's listening, I just encourage you to start with whatever it is that you've been thinking about doing to keep it simple. To Michele's point, I think microlearning is a great way for us to build skills over time. Sometimes we wait and hesitate because we think that we have to have like all of the answers, but I think we just need to start now and dig in and provide all of these resources for our team. It doesn't have to be complicated, and just focus on the journey.
And Glen, going to come to you to close out our session.
All right. So I would say from a learning cultural standpoint, one of the things I would strongly recommend is alignment to a company's culture. And I think this is easy for me to say because Equifax actually has a core value that's accelerate innovation and new products. And we have an actual new product innovation team that's measured on the number of new products that go to market each year, right? Go from 90 in 2020 to expected 120 in 2021. And so that makes, I think, my job easy as a learning leader, because then I can see the trickle down effect, right? You have a new product, you have to train people on a new product, the back end teams that support it. But one of the things that we don't want to lose sight of in this alignment is not top down necessarily. It can also be bottom up. So you have to give your employees a voice and a channel by which they can express that, because innovation occurs throughout the organization, right? And learning can kind of help facilitate that. But you have to be able to provide a wiki or a community for everyone in the organization, because it's everyone's responsibility. And through the learning comes innovation. So it's really developing this learning ecosystem, I think is a term that people use, so that it's everyone's job and not just the training team's job, because it's not my job. My job is to help facilitate and kind of grow it. I think the other thing, and Finn touched on it, it's finding the passion project or those change champions, right? So what we used to say at Home Depot is, you know, if we need to support, certainly leadership support is required. At the same time, we would go out and say, find the people who bleed orange. Find the people who bleed orange and get those people engaged and involved, because they're going to be the ones who help spread your voice, your cause, and that also, of course, feeds into innovation. So whatever your company color is, find out who bleeds and get them engaged. I think that expedites the process, not just having leadership signing a check. So.
No, Glenn, I appreciate that insight. And once again, great insight from everyone. We appreciate everybody's time. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Like I mentioned, we will certainly follow up with you in regards to that insight and that information. Also, as mentioned, we will be going to Clubhouse to really debrief what's taken place here. So excited to try that new functionality out in regards to an MLevel webinar. But definitely my sincere thanks to Michele Wideman, Finn Toner, Glen Hasling, Kaylene Eckels, and Michele Snead for taking time out of their busy day, obviously, to come and share their thoughts in regards to what a true culture of learning is. My name is Josh Felix. I serve as a senior strategist at MLevel. We are a digital learning platform. If you want to learn more, feel free to visit www.mlevel.com. But we look forward to seeing you in April for our next webinar. Thanks, and everybody have a great day.